I mean, most people in the housing market, I make this argument, aren't actually making that much money because you buy your first house and then you upgrade to the next one. You're just living your whole life in debt. You never really, until you downsize, get to see the benefit of that capital growth. There are obviously like good things you can do, like you can get reverse mortgages and you can leverage your wealth and stuff. And there is benefit to owning a house compared to renting, but it's not like in theory, lots of Australians are millionaires now because they own a house that's $1 million. Like that's the median now, I think. But like, I don't think most Australians feel like millionaires.
Welcome to the Get Rich Slow Club podcast. I'm Anna, and I'm here today with Jack Toohey, who is an Australian creative director and activist known for his ability to distill complex issues into clear, compelling content. His new book, Better Things Are Possible, is a call to courage, connection, and action. Thank you so much for being on the show, Jack.
Thanks for having me.
So we often kick it off with a money win or a money loss. Do you have anything that you want to share for today?
Yeah, so I was looking to change my flights back to Sydney from Melbourne tonight, and I discovered in my old Virgin account, which I haven't been flying much Virgin because Virgin and Qantas are too expensive to fly domestically these days. I found out that I had $800 in my account from like COVID or something. So it didn't really cost, well, it did cost me money to change it, but it felt like it was free money because it's just been sitting there for 4 years or something since COVID. So.
Yeah, finding free money, it's not free, like you said. It just feels so good because then you're like, oh, I can justify it, even though I had to pay that money.
Yeah, it's kind of like money down the back of the couch or something.
Yeah.
It's money you had, but.
Yeah, there's nothing better than finding money in your pocket. This is finding money in your flight account, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I love it. So your book starts with a very optimistic take, which I really love because sometimes when you're looking at things like the economy or climate change, it can be quite depressing. Why is it necessary in today's climate to be somewhat optimistic when it comes to the economy?
I just think that the prevailing reaction to the state of everything, the economy, climate change, just that kind of the social climate as well, is one of pessimism or apathy. And ultimately, when there are people, a very small sector of society that benefit from the way things are, the only people that benefit from us being pessimistic or apathetic and taking ourselves out of the system or just not believing that we have an ability to change it, they're the ones that win. So therefore, we don't really have a choice but to be hopeful and optimistic about the way things could be because we know that things are unfair, and that by the fact that something is unfair means there must be a way that it can be fair. And the only way to get there is by more of us believing that we can get there. So that's why I wanted to start in the book with just this rallying cry of hope, because that is the answer. Like that is how we get to a better future. And yeah, it's just kind of too easy to succumb to that apathy. It's just like ingrained into our culture as well, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think especially when we're talking about the economy or finance, it's so easy to feel down about the cost of housing, the cost of just living. It's just really, really expensive. And I know that often on this podcast, we're talking about how to hack that kind of stuff, how to learn, how to educate a lot around finances. And I think the economy is essentially the same way, just understanding how the economy works, because money that comes into your bank account and how you spend it is something that you have control of. But there's all of these other outside forces that you don't have control of. So the first part of your book is literally about the economy, and there was a lot of really great facts there. What are some of the big things that you would love people to take away within those first couple chapters, especially?
Yeah, I think I started the book talking about the housing market and what has changed since like kind of the post-war boom period, and where everyone kind of came back from World War II and they've been through like the economic downturn between the two world wars, and there was a much greater sense of collective strength. The only way that everyone survived like a massive world war is by banding together, and that kind of continued on for decades after the World War II. So that was building public housing. It was just having a really high tax rate on super high earners that was then invested into community and into infrastructure. And like a lot of the things that we benefit from today, like gutters, are things that came from the post-war boom of just like people realizing that it was a good thing to pool resources and make basic infrastructure like that. And then along came like Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher and this idea of neoliberalism, and it really took that collective strength and made it to an individual one. And, figure out your own shit first before you worry about community. Actually, don't even worry about community, because we're going to make it expensive to go to the community events or that thing here, or, and so that I think is why I kind of started the book there, because even though it is talking about economics and it is talking about housing, it's also like fracturing our like basic humanity of humans have always survived by working together and coming together. And so we find ourselves in this economy now where it's like we need to do what we have to do to get ahead, and we need to work within the system. And I think it's important that people are getting tips about how to survive in this system that is pitted against us in a lot of ways. We also need to remember that like actually things could be a lot better if we stop thinking so much purely on our own patch and worry more about each other. I always think that collective strength is going to be greater than individual strength.
Yeah, for sure. I love what you say about having to work as a collective. And I think that so much of how our economy and how our systems has changed has really made it individualistic, which makes it really hard. Because collectively, if we work together, we can have amazing things. We have libraries, we have schools, like all of these things are financed by us. But if we're doing that individually, we can see how it plays out in the US, for example, right?
Yeah.
Some of the parts of the book that I really loved is that you talked about housing, and that's a big topic here in Australia. We all get very excited about talking about housing or very depressed, depending on what side of the coin you are, whether you own or you don't. One of the things that I found the most interesting is how you kept bringing it back to speculation and how our housing industry here is so speculative.
Yep.
What do you mean by that?
Well, basically all of the value of housing is just from us going, we think that housing is going to continue to rise because it has historically, and therefore it does. We have been building more houses than we need every decade for the last 40 years.
Is that true?
Yes.
Yeah.
So our population has grown more slowly than our house. So if you take 1985 as the baseline, if everyone in theory was housed in 1985, and we can agree that housing was affordable at that time, that's our baseline. Every year since then, our population growth as a percentage has been smaller than our housing growth. So we've built more dwellings than we've needed in the last decade.
Even with immigration.
Even with almost entirely with immigration, our birth rate is pretty low.
Yeah.
If we didn't have immigration, our population would be shrinking. So
I just know that so many people argue that point specifically, and I know that you have the data to back it up in your books.
Yeah. So I mean, that's the prevailing narrative is that it's immigration that's causing it. It makes sense. It makes sense that if you go, well, housing is expensive, so if we just stop demand, aka increasing the people coming here, if that's what you're defining as demand, then house prices can't keep going up. But they did during COVID. They continued to rise at record rates during COVID, because that's not the only thing that's happening in the housing market. And the demand is not the demand of I need somewhere to live. It's the demand I need capital growth. And that is where most Australians think that they're going to get capital growth from, is because the housing market, we keep speculating that the housing market will go up, and it keeps doing that. And some people make a lot of money from that. But most people in the housing market, I make this argument, aren't actually making that much money, because you buy your first house and then you upgrade to the next one. You're just living your whole life in debt. You never really, until you downsize, get to see the benefit of that capital growth. There are obviously good things you can do, you can get reverse mortgages and you can leverage your wealth and stuff. And there is benefit to owning a house compared to renting, but it's not you're not, in theory, lots of Australians are millionaires now because they own a house that's $1 million. That's the median now, I think. So, but I don't think most Australians feel like millionaires. So basically it just has all come to this idea that we just think the housing market will grow, and it does, because it has to, because every year more people buy into this market. And then now they're in, as I talk about in the book, you're in this Ponzi where now you need the people at the bottom of the housing market, the youngest people, the newest people into the market, now also need new people to come in and buy a house, the market. And that's the real demand. It's not that there isn't enough houses to house people. Because my final point on this thing is a house is a depreciating asset in real terms. The gutters start rusting, doors break off their hinges, the windows get smashed by the kids' cricket ball. They're like a car. They get worse with age, but somehow they're they're doubling in value every 10 years. That doesn't make any kind of sense as a value in the real sense, value to human life sense. It's not doubling in value. The house hasn't doubled in size. It hasn't doubled in its utility. it's just sat there and actually technically depreciated in that time. It doubled in value. So
Yeah, and you say that a lot of that is speculation, and also just the policy we have in play, right? We have negative gearing, we have the capital gain discount, and all of that kind of incentivizes owning property.
Yeah.
What I thought was really interesting is you also talked about, I guess, how it's a Ponzi scheme. You kind of get into it. You're investing and you're buying property, but that wasn't always the case. Like there was a lot of public housing that existed, which was kind of surprising to me. This is what I really enjoyed about hearing a little bit about the background story of Australia. Like there was a lot of public housing, but that kind of changed over time.
Mm-hmm.
Why?
Well, that's when neoliberalism came in and the Thatcherism or Reaganism or whatever you want to call it. But it also infected like Bob Hawke is like heralded as this great progressive prime minister because he was a larrikin, but he also ushered in this idea of neoliberal economics, and then Keating after him. And then John Howard really like poured petrol on the neoliberal fire with like the capital gains tax discount and stuff. But we used to, like in the post-war period, we invested. So like we invested in public housing. It was like 20-something% every year of all new builds was public housing. That was creating jobs for servicemen that were coming back. It's creating housing for servicemen that were coming back. A lot of like the red brick homes and red brick like medium density apartment complexes around the city of Melbourne stuff were built in that period of time. If they're a 70-year-old building, they were probably built in this post-war period. Again, it just comes back to what I said at the start. We valued the idea that we should be building a nation where we all have like shared prosperity because we had that collectivism from the war. And so we lost that as the neoliberalism came in. And that's when it changed to be a wealth-driving asset rather than just a place to live. And yeah, the capital gains tax discount and negative gearing and stuff, that's when it really supercharged in like 1999. That's when it became safer in a lot of ways to be like, I'm going to invest in bricks and mortar rather than like the stock market, which was what the idea of the capital gains tax discount was for. It was like meant to encourage investment in business. But like, but I can invest in this house over here and then I can encourage people into the Ponzi and then there's no risk because house price keeps going up. And when I sell it, I can reduce, like I walk away better off than I might have, even though technically not, like you probably would have gotten higher returns in the stock market. It feels safer. And it's part of like the dream of owning a home. So there's like a romantic notion that has been like kind of mixed in with this financial kind of notion as well, which I think is really intoxicating. And that's kind of part of it because we're all in this frenzy. Like we have to buy a house to be wealthy, but that's actually not true.
Yeah. And I feel like the dream has evolved. Like people want their own house, but then they're like, well, I also want an investment property because then I can make some money on the side, whether it's retirement or earlier or whatever that might be. And public housing is often seen as so negative here in Australia, whereas you look at like places like Vienna or Singapore, where their housing kind of, a lot of it is public. A lot of it is kind of reimagining what housing can look like so that everyone can be housed or the poorest can be housed, right?
Yeah. And that's like one of the the biggest shames, I think, and very successful like kind of scare campaigns about public housing is that people have this notion that public housing is dirty and deros live there and to an extent that can be true because we got successive governments like at a state level have like done this thing with dereliction, like eviction through dereliction. Basically, they want to sell this land to private developers, but there are people living there. That's so annoying that they can't sell this public housing while there's people living in there. So, well, we're not going to replace that light fitting. Oh, we're not going to come and clean the grout. Like, we're not going to do this. We're not going to do that. And eventually people have to move out and these places do become derelict. And so then that's our collective conscious is like, well, these buildings are ugly and smelly and falling apart. Like public housing is bad, but they're only bad because successive governments have decided to make it bad as a policy choice. There's no reason why, like a government can make more quality accommodation than like a private developer can because there's no profit motive.
Yeah.
And they can do it at a break even. Like right in the book that like the government does do this. They do it for the Defence Housing Authority. So they build houses for the army in the Northern Territory and they do it at a profit. They actually make money on this thing, but it's just not as big a margin as developers or whatever would like. So
that was such a great example because I had no clue. I had no clue about that. It's like, yeah, if you can build public housing for a specific demographic, why can't we do it for the people who need it the most?
And they end up being like kind of sectioned into like some suburbs, and like everyone thinks like that's the suburb there the public housing is, and that's where all the poor people are. But like that, if you have public housing in every suburb and it's mixed in with all varying levels of wealth, then there's way more economic opportunity for those people, and there's way more economic opportunity for people that already have wealth, because there's potentially new people that can work at the fish and chip shop or work at the Bunnings or whatever it is. Bunnings is a bad example because they're a monopoly, but anyway, I like Bunnings. There's Bunnings gets away with a lot. It's like so beloved, but it's like the biggest monopoly in Australia.
It's because they do a lot of community stuff too, right? Like they always have the community groups coming and doing the
Barbie and stuff. Yeah, the Bunnings probably has a comeuppance at some point. But anyway, I digress. I just think that like it's the biggest shame, and it's so like public housing can be so good, and also actually people also get confused a little bit about this idea that when I'm advocating for public housing, they think that I'm advocating for no one owning for owning homes. But actually, home ownership can increase when there's more public housing, because it means less people are renting. So there's a tether in the market. You're not going to make as much money off me from renting if I have the opportunity to go to a rent stabilized public housing thing. You can't put my rent up so much because there's a tether in the market. Therefore, it's not as attractive as an investment. Therefore, you leave the market. Therefore, someone else can buy that house. So public housing actually increases home ownership and it decreases private rentals. That's good for most people, unless you're a landlord. Yeah, for sure. And so many people want to just own their own home. Like, of course, people want to have rental properties, but like for the majority of people, they just want to have their own place where they feel secure and no one's going to kick them out, right? Yeah. And it's just that because people own multiple properties, that it creates less opportunity for people to own their own home, and it increases the time in the rental market. But again, if there was a public housing system that actually was big enough and quality enough that it could be a viable alternative to the rental market, then, as I say, it would be less investor friendly, and therefore investors will put their money into the stock market or into new businesses and innovation, which I also talk about, rather than just like bricks and mortar. You know?
Yeah, no, for sure. I'd love to talk about the innovation piece because I thought that was really compelling. You talked about how we put so much of our money into housing that we don't actually support innovation in the way that we should here in Australia. Why?
Again, it's just the way that we've redirected our thinking, like on the Australian economics. Like there's the thing like we're houses and holes. Our whole economy is just houses and mining. And we have just lost sight of all the other ways that you can make revenue, both at a federal level as like a country on the global kind of market, but also just like internally with our businesses. The government doesn't invest as much in innovation as other governments around the world. I use Germany as an example. I'm not going to say the exact percentages because I'll get them wrong, but they invest way more as a percentage of GDP into innovation, which then grows your GDP because then you have products that are scalable and you can sell and they improve people's lives. And so when so much of our like economy, it's like how many trillion dollars or whatever is invested in the housing market, just swirling around, just changing hands within the thing, and then the banks are making their record profits. Like we're not investing in things like the CSIRO, which I talk about, like who invented Wi-Fi. They invented Wi-Fi. Yeah. Just if we funded the CSIRO, imagine what other cool stuff they would come up with, you know? And Wi-Fi, you could argue, is a pretty important invention for the economy and grows the economy, I would say. So I would just love for all of us to reframe our thinking like that we should use our money, whatever spare money we have, to invest in that innovation. Because we'll probably financially benefit if things go well. Maybe it has to be a diverse portfolio or whatever, but like, yeah, it's like, what is it, average 10% return on the stock market, whereas like housing's 6 or 7%. And you're investing in new technology or a way of reversing climate change or solar panels or something that's then also directly impacting the cost of living in a good way and our quality of life.
Yeah. And it goes back to kind of funneling that back into our society, into our communities, because you're supporting businesses, you're doing innovation. It is an interesting kind of compelling way of thinking about that. How much of our money is in debt? It goes to the banks. And you talked quite a bit about how banks always win. And it's true, right? Like banks are taking less risk, you also talk about in the book. How is that?
Yeah, I mean, the idea of like when you take out a loan and it's got interest on it, the interest is them saying, well, we're taking a punt on you. Mm-hmm. So you need to give us a little bit extra to like make us feel safe, and also for the, for the pleasure of doing business, and so they don't have that risk in the housing market because the housing market continues to endlessly inflate. I don't think it can keep doing that forever. People were saying it's going to crash 10 years ago and 20 years ago. At some point, it has to. It has to. I don't know when, but it just can't keep going the way it is. But when that happens, basically the government of the day has like a couple of options. It's like bail out the people that have negative equity, that own more on their house than they owe. They owe more to the bank than they own themselves, or bail out the banks. Otherwise, our economy completely crashes.
Yeah.
And that's what we saw in the GFC in America. They just bailed out, like Obama just bailed out the banks.
Yeah.
And one person went to jail. And however many hundreds of millions of people, hundreds or millions or thousands, I can't remember, people lost their homes and lost their savings and lost their retirement. Like so many people were affected. And yeah, one dude went to jail. It was like a random, I don't even know why it was that one guy, but he wasn't the mastermind. And so the banks are making like billions of dollars of profit every year. And it's more and more every year. It's becoming more and more from housing. Once upon a time, they used to give far less to housing than they do now. And a lot more of it was in startup businesses, which again comes to innovation. But there's more risk because some businesses are going to fail. Some businesses are going to go on to make billions of dollars. Some businesses are going to cost the bank $1 million or whatever. But that's the whole point of interest. That's the whole point of like them taking on the risk, is that some of the businesses are going to fail. And that's how they're able to, that's the business. That's meant to be the business model.
Yeah.
But they don't have that in housing. So of course they're going to like stimulate that idea, that cultural notion that we have that housing is a good thing to drive wealth. But as I said before, like most of us, unless you're a property investor, don't actually benefit from the housing market going up. We spend most of our time not even actually technically owning a home. It takes like 17, 19 years to pay off the principal or whatever. So the bank owns your home. And so, yeah, I just think that the banks are getting a pretty good deal out of us.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about how Melbourne's housing has kind of slowed down. And a lot of that is because of policy that was put into place in terms of for investors and so forth. And then I look back at Vancouver, where I'm originally from, and we have rent caps that go up with inflation. And then I think if we had a couple of these policies in place, you can still be a landlord. You can still own rental property, but at least it's not as lucrative. Like more people can potentially get into housing because we're just making it ever so harder, right? Because it is hard if you can't get into the housing market compared to someone who owns like 12 properties. Just making it slightly harder. And that's why Melbourne's not doing as well as the news says. But like the alternative side of that is like Melbourne's making it more affordable to be a first home buyer.
Mm-hmm. And that's good.
Right?
I would think that like Melbourne is kind of like, Melbourne and Canberra both have different policy settings in place that are stabilizing the market. Canberra is a very expensive place to live, but that's also because there's a lot of like public servants on high wages and stuff there. In Melbourne, it's like, yeah, is it the vacancy, like the Airbnb stuff?
Yeah.
And yeah, which just makes like property as an investment less attractive. And so people would go, oh, this is annoying now because I have to rent it out more, or like putting in like rental standards and being like, well, I don't really want to deal with the fluff of just having to fix this aircon or whatever.
Yeah.
But I can make 10% from like a diverse portfolio, and I don't actually have to do really anything if it's over there. Someone else can manage it. Like people go and they make more money through that. But until we start doing those little things that make housing less attractive, it just continues to be. So that's why I think that like actually like installing better renters' rights like is probably the fastest way to make housing market more fair. Because if you make it like you have to have properly like sealed windows and like air conditioning and solar panels on the roof and like a really like high standard of living for renters, then that immediately improves the lives of those who are stuck renting, but it also makes it less attractive. So more people can then buy a home and you have a higher proportion of first home buyers or just home owner occupiers. So I think renters' rights are like one of the big things. Unfortunately, like that is a state by state thing, and the federal government likes to kind of just like wipe their hands of any responsibility. It's like, oh, that's a state issue. But the federal government always works on things that like are state issues, but they get the states together to find solutions to the problems. They did it with COVID, so they can do it with housing. And I think that is like, that's something that gives me really like hope. We're not there yet, but they are, and Melbourne does exist as like as an example of how it can work, and Canberra to an extent as well. But if we have this more nationalized view of it, our lives like as renters or would-be owner occupiers would like quite quickly become a lot better.
Yeah. Well, I think of that in Vancouver. I know I keep referencing back, but there's like very strict laws around rent increases in terms of like, if you want someone to leave your rental property, it is really hard to kick someone out. So you're not getting these 200% increases, which makes it really unstable for people to live, find new housing and so forth. It's hard because like on this podcast, we talk often about how to build wealth and how to build wealth for yourself. And a lot of it is individualistic because there's only so much you can do. But holistically, when we're looking at it, the economy affects all of us. Housing affects all of us. At some point in our lives, most of us have rented. And I feel as strongly about like rental rights, even though now I'm a homeowner. But for the longest time, I was renting, and that affects so many of us, right?
There's like actually like renting like decreases your life expectancy or something. Like there are some like real like serious hard facts around the health implications of renting, the uncertainty of renting, particularly in Australia. Whereas in Europe and stuff, you can rent the same apartment for your whole life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and that gives you so much certainty. I just think like also that's something that gets lost in this conversation. And I know I've been going on about like collective strength a lot already, but like the cultural implications of like of uncertainty around where you're going to live and like how much you can invest in time and in money in the communities that are around you. Like the people like just want to live often where they grew up, and that's basically impossible for most people, particularly in the big cities. And that has an untold social impact and social cost that we don't really talk about.
Yeah.
That idea that like you want to go to this, you want to know your baker and you want to know your barista and you want to make, like I've made connections with people when I've been living in a certain suburb and then I've had to move because my economic circumstances have changed and those relationships and ties are severed. And that's like really sad.
Yeah. And also just like the community of having a diverse community, having old people and young people and having all of that. Like you can't have a place, you see this in places in the world, in San Francisco, where you have so many tech people working, high wages, but then it's unaffordable for your local taqueria to keep running because they cannot live there anymore. And I'm worried that that's going to happen in parts of Australia and it has in certain suburbs as well.
Yeah, like teachers and nurses, like they can't afford to live near schools and hospitals that they teach at, but those schools and hospitals still need teachers, you know, and you can't just rely on like generational wealth to place all the teachers in the suburbs with high house values. Like that doesn't make sense. So again, that's another thing that I think that we're in it does give me hope that I do think that we are in the middle of a transition period, but we can't really, it's hard to see right now because we're kind of in the eye of the storm.
Yeah.
And because it can't continue going on like this because there will be like very negative impacts. Like if nurses cannot get to their hospital because they live an hour away is the only place that they can afford on their nurse wage, then people will die. But there will be like a real like tangible impact. Or if the teachers are leaving the profession because they can't make enough money to live near the school, then kids get dumber, you know, like they're real like tangible things. And so I think like more of us will feel that as the housing market continues to become more and more unaffordable. If it doubles every year, it's exponential growth.
Yeah.
And our wages are not growing exponentially last I checked. So
no, they're not. I wish they were. Then it'd be a different story.
Yeah, exactly.
We'd all be rich. We wouldn't even need this podcast.
Exactly.
We wouldn't be talking about the housing industry. No, it's true. I think having a positive outlook is so important as well, because like a lot of people who are listening to this podcast may have built wealth and have wealth, and they're like, how do I continue to build wealth? But we have a lot of people who are like, I just put my first like $20 into investing, or I'm saving from my first house, and that will be 10 years away from now. Do you have any practical advice for people how to stay optimistic? I know it's hard like on an individual level, but I love your idea of like collectively talking about it. Collectively, I often talk about like policy as well, like reaching out to your representatives for some of these changes. What are some things that you think people can take away to keep that positivity going?
Yeah, I mean, I want to turn everyone into advocates and activists, basically. I think like what I was saying about renters' rights before, I think is like kind of our potential breaking case of emergency like solution. And I think that the more people we can get advocating for renters' rights, even if they do own, or even if they are rent vesting, or they have managed to get themselves onto the bottom rungs of the wealth ladder, I think that's a really great area to like exert energy on, like talking to our local MPs and stuff, and actually like presenting that case, because like, everything that we just talked about, like this idea that it has like a great social benefit and it is a fast way of fixing the housing market, because we're in a situation where people need the house market to continue to grow. So at least if we can give people security in their own renting home, then that's at least a small win. The other thing that I think about that is like this, everything is so expensive. And something that I've just done, I got a call this morning when I was coming over here from the Bush Care Society in my suburb that I grew up in. And I'm going to go every now and then and help like weed the bush with these people. And again, it's people of all different walks of life and ages, and it's free. And like, I get a Tim Tam or something at the end. But just like stuff that is free, that is like hands-on and community focused is something that I'm really trying to like put my attention towards. I like I feel pretty like economically precarious because, well, you can't really make a lot of money from being a progressive commentator or really from being an author or anything. So I don't really know like personally like what my financial outlook is. And I don't think that, I'm nowhere near being able to buy a house. And that's something that personally like does get me down. I can understand that people would kind of listen to this podcast and like look for that hope as well, like that way of getting out of the sense that like we're stuck. But I just do feel like, and I know I got to talk about community, finding free community events. It sounds really like naff because we've been taught to think that like going to your community hall and like joining a choir or like going to your council meetings to hear about how we're going to change from commingled recycling to something else, or like start composting. I don't know, whatever it is, like there is little machinations in our communities that happen that we often, because our lives are so busy, we just kind of miss out on. So I think actually seeking those things out, for me, that's going to be bush care, but I'm going to find other ways, I'm sure.
I think it's important. So many of us are online, so we feel completely disconnected when you don't have people. Like, we are humans. We absolutely need human connection, and you learn from other people. You build empathy, you create community, and that's where we have a better understanding of each other. So I think that that's absolutely important.
Yes, the irony of social media is it makes us like...
We're connected, but we're not.
Yeah, it's such a sad thing. And that's when I was actually writing the book, a little bit of a tangent. Like the thing that like kept me writing the book was that I would go into the Botanic Gardens in Sydney and write till my laptop died, and then I'd go to the art gallery and I would see like the nice ladies at the front desk and I would talk to them for a couple of minutes, and that would like buoy me with so much just energy to keep writing. And I just feel like, and I think that work from home is like a really great thing that came out of COVID, and like that's really brought us a lot of flexibility, and it definitely helps more people like be able to have more opportunity financially as well, because we can have there's more jobs open to us, I guess. But it also has severed those ties, right? And we have to find them elsewhere. So yeah, join your local bush care society.
I love it. It's a great takeaway. Jack, thank you so much for coming on the show. Where can people find you?
For now, I'm on Instagram, and I don't really post on TikTok anymore. Instagram, I've got a Substack, just type my name into Google and it'll come up. My book's available at all good bookstores, and hopefully
local.
some of the bad ones like Amazon. And yeah, I'm thinking about what my next steps are like. As I mentioned, I don't love like what social media is doing to our brains. I feel sometimes bad about using that as my platform. So I'm gonna just keep an ear out to see what I'm gonna do, because I'm gonna try to do more in-person, real things in the years to come. So
Awesome. Thank you.
thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for joining us. If you found this episode helpful, please rate us 5 stars, write a review, or share with a friend. If you're new to investing, make sure to listen to our first 10 episodes. Follow us at Get Rich Slow Club or Tash at Tash Invests, or me at Ana Cristina.
The Get Rich Slow Club podcast is a collaboration between Tash Etchman from Tash Invest and Ana Cristina from Perla. Knowledge is power, especially when it comes to investing. So make sure you check out our financial services guides and read the product disclosure statement and target market determination for any investments you're considering. See our show notes for more info. Any advice is general and does not consider your financial situation, needs, or objectives, so consider whether it's appropriate for you. This show was brought to you by Natasha Etchman, who is an authorized representative 1299881 of Guideway Financial Services, AFSL 420367, and Perla, who is an authorized representative 1281540 of Sanlam Private Wealth, AFSL 337927. The Get Rich Slow Club acknowledges the traditional custodians of the land we record on. From coast to coast, across land, waters, and communities, we pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging.